The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness of the Joint Operations Center like a blade. Captain Torres leaned forward, coffee forgotten, as the transmission pierced the silence. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Trident 6. We are compromised, I repeat, we are compromised. Multiple KIA, requesting immediate extraction." The coordinates that followed made every operator in the room freeze. The SEAL team was 43 nautical miles behind enemy lines, pinned down in terrain that had swallowed two previous rescue attempts. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves slammed his palm against the tactical display, the blue dots representing friendly forces looking impossibly small against the red hostile zones. How the hell did they get that deep? His question hung in the air like smoke. The mission had been routine reconnaissance, 12 hours in, 12 hours out. That was 18 hours ago. Now Trident 6 was calling for help from a position that shouldn't have existed on any map. The room erupted in controlled chaos. Radio operators cycling through frequencies, intelligence analysts pulling satellite imagery, logistics personnel calculating fuel loads and flight times. But every calculation led to the same crushing reality. Their closest air assets were stationed 127 miles away, and the enemy surface-to-air missile sites had turned the rescue corridor into a death trap. The math was simple and brutal. No conventional aircraft could reach the SEALs and return alive. "Sir, we've got another transmission," the radio operator called out, his voice tight with urgency. But this wasn't coming from Trident 6. The frequency was different, older, crackling with the distinctive signature of outdated military hardware. "Unidentified aircraft, you are in restricted airspace. State your call sign and intentions immediately." Colonel Reeves grabbed the handset, his knuckles white against the black plastic. "This is CENTCOM Actual. Identify yourself." The response came through layers of static, a woman's voice steady despite the interference. "CENTCOM Actual. This is Valkyrie 17, requesting permission to assist with combat search and rescue operations." The call sign meant nothing to anyone in the room, but the confidence in that voice cut through their desperation like sunlight through storm clouds. "Valkyrie 17, you are not on our roster. What is your current position and aircraft type?" A pause then, flying inbound from Grayfield Air Station, currently 20 nautical miles from target area. Aircraft is F-16C Block 30. The response sent a chill through the operations center. Grayfield had been mothballed for 3 years. According to every official record, nothing flew from those cracked runways anymore except desert wind and tumbleweeds. Yet here was someone claiming not just to be airborne from a dead base, but positioned perfectly to attempt what everyone else had deemed impossible. The mystery deepened with each passing second, but time was a luxury the trapped SEALs didn't have. The intelligence officer looked up from his computer screen, his face pale in the blue glow. "Sir, Grayfield's been closed since 2021. There's no way," but his words were cut short by another transmission from the mysterious pilot, and this time her voice carried something that made seasoned warriors lean closer to their radios. It wasn't just confidence anymore. It was the sound of someone who had stared death in the face before and walked away to tell about it. Major Patricia Wraith Castellanos had been flying combat missions when most of the officers in that operations center were still in high school. Her F-16 Fighting Falcon, tail number 870257, had rolled off the production line in 1987 and had seen more combat than aircraft half its age. The Pratt & Whitney engine hummed with the steady reliability of a machine that had been maintained by hands that understood every bolt, every wire, every component that kept death at bay at 30,000 feet. She banked the aircraft slightly, her eyes scanning the green glow of the radar display. The surface-to-air threat rings appeared as amber circles on her tactical screen, overlapping like deadly ripples on a pond. Between those circles lay a corridor barely wide enough for a motorcycle, let alone a fighter jet. But Wraith had flown through worse, much worse. The scars on her ejection seat's headrest told stories that would never make it into official reports. CENTCOM Actual, Valkyrie 17 is 30 seconds out from threat envelope. Request immediate coordinates for friendly forces and current tactical situation. Her voice remained steady despite the fact that her aircraft's radar warning receiver was painting threats like Christmas lights. The enemy had enough firepower concentrated in this valley to down an entire squadron, and she was about to thread the needle alone in an aircraft that the Pentagon had officially written off as obsolete. The response came quickly. Valkyrie 17, be advised, Trident 6 is surrounded by approximately 30 to 40 hostiles with heavy weapons and possible MANPADS. 2 previous rescue attempts have been unsuccessful. This is an extremely high-risk scenario. The warning was meant to deter, to make her reconsider, to send her back to whatever hole she had crawled out of. Instead, it only confirmed what she already knew. The SEALs were dead men, unless someone was willing to do what others couldn't. Copy CENTCOM. Understood. Beginning combat approach now. Wraith pushed the throttle forward, feeling the familiar press of acceleration against her spine. The F-16 responded like a thoroughbred given its head, climbing rapidly into the pre-dawn sky. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, broken only by jagged mountains that looked like dragons' teeth in the pale light. Somewhere in those peaks, 12 American warriors were fighting for their lives, counting bullets and watching the horizon for salvation that might never come. She had been here before in this exact situation, making this same impossible calculation. The difference was that last time she hadn't been alone. Last time she'd had a wingman, someone to share the load, to watch her six while she focused on the mission ahead. That wingman was gone now, had been gone for 3 years, but his voice still echoed in her headset during moments like these. Wraith, you've got this. Trust your training, trust your aircraft, and bring them home. The memory stung, but it also steadied her hands on the controls. The radio erupted with overlapping transmissions as the Joint Operations Center tried to coordinate what was about to happen. Intelligence updates flowed like water, tactical assessments changed by the second, and through it all, the clock kept ticking. Every minute that passed was another minute closer to sunrise, another minute that exposed the trapped SEALs to enemy observation, another minute that brought them closer to becoming names on a memorial wall instead of warriors who made it home to their families. All stations, this is Valkyrie 17. I'm beginning my approach run. Recommend all friendly forces mark their positions with infrared strobes and prepare for immediate extraction upon my signal. The transmission was crisp, professional, exactly what you'd expect from a combat pilot with decades of experience. But beneath the military formality, there was something else, a personal investment that went beyond duty, beyond orders, beyond the call of service. This wasn't just another mission for Wraith Castellanos. This was redemption painted in contrails across an indifferent sky. The F-16's targeting pod painted the valley in stark black and white, thermal signatures blooming like flowers against the cool desert floor. She could see them now. The SEALs clustered in a defensive position behind a rocky outcropping, their body heat showing as white ghosts against the darker background. Around them, in a rough circle perhaps 200 meters across, the enemy forces showed as moving dots, constantly shifting, probing for weaknesses, preparing for what they assumed would be a final assault. Trident 6, this is Valkyrie 17. I have visual on your position. Mark your northwestern boundary with IR strobe, acknowledge. The response came immediately, desperate and relieved. Valkyrie 17, Trident 6, copy your last. Marking now, be advised we have wounded and are critically low on ammunition. We cannot hold this position much longer. The desperation in the SEAL commander's voice was palpable, but so was the hope. Someone had come for them. Against all odds, against all logic, someone was here. Wraith rolled the aircraft into a steep dive, the valley walls rushing past her canopy like gray thunder. The radar warning receiver screamed as multiple surface-to-air missile sights locked onto her aircraft. their electronic fingers reaching across the darkness to caress death itself. She had perhaps 30 seconds before those locks became launches, 30 seconds to do what two previous attempts had failed to accomplish. 30 seconds to prove that experience, skill, and sheer determination could overcome impossible odds. The first missile launch came as she expected, a bright finger of flame rising from the valley floor like an accusation against the sky. She rolled left, then right, dispensing chaff and flares in a carefully choreographed dance with death. The missile passed close enough that she could see its exhaust plume in her peripheral vision, close enough that the proximity fuse should have triggered, close enough that by all rights she should have been falling toward the earth in a cloud of burning aluminum and regret. But she wasn't falling. She was flying, and the seals below were still alive, and that was all that mattered. The second missile launch came from a different position, forcing her to break left into a valley wall that seemed to rush toward her canopy with malevolent intent. She pulled 6GS, feeling the familiar gray edges creeping into her vision, feeling the familiar weight of gravity trying to drag consciousness from her brain. This was the edge, the place where physics and physiology met human will, and she had lived on this edge for so long that it felt like home. Valkyrie 17, you are too low. Pull up, pull up. The warning came from someone in the operations center, someone watching her dot crawl across a tactical display, someone who understood intellectually what she was attempting, but had never felt the stick shake in their hands as missiles reached through the darkness with fingers of fire and steel. She ignored the warning, ignored the screaming radar warning receiver, ignored everything except the thermal signature of American warriors who needed her to be better than good, better than lucky, better than the sum of all the training and experience that had brought her to this moment in this place against these odds. The targeting reticle settled over the largest concentration of enemy forces, and she squeezed the trigger. The 20mm cannon spoke with authority, its voice drowning out every other sound in the cockpit. Tracers reached down from the sky like falling stars, and where they touched the earth, the thermal signatures of the enemy began to scatter like leaves in a hurricane. She was too low, flying too fast, taking too many risks, but the mission parameters had changed. This wasn't about following the book anymore. This was about bringing 12 Americans home to their families, and the book had never been written for situations like this. A second missile launch forced her into another punishing turn, this one taking her directly over the SEAL position at an altitude that would have made a crop duster pilot nervous. She could see individual figures now, could see muzzle flashes winking like fireflies as the trapped warriors laid down covering fire. One of them was waving, actually waving, at her aircraft as it screamed overhead. The gesture was absurd, desperate, and absolutely human in a way that cut through all the tactical bullshit and reminded her why she was here. Trident 6 Valkyrie 17. Immediate extraction helicopter is en route to your position, ETA 12 minutes. Can you hold? The question was almost rhetorical. They would hold because they had to hold because the alternative was unthinkable because that's what SEALs did when the chips were down and the world was ending around them. But the answer that came back surprised even her. Valkyrie, Trident 6. Thanks to your gun runs, we can hold all day. That was some of the finest flying I've ever seen. The compliment hit harder than she expected, settling somewhere in her chest like a warm ember. It had been a long time since someone had acknowledged her skills, a long time since anyone had seen past the mothballed base and the obsolete aircraft to recognize the pilot inside. But there was no time for sentiment, no time for reflection. The mission was only half complete, and the hardest part was yet to come. 2 more missile sites had activated, their search radars sweeping the valley like lighthouse beams probing fog. She climbed rapidly, trading altitude for energy, trading exposure for positioning. The F-16 responded eagerly, its engines singing at full military power as it clawed for the safety of higher altitudes. But safety was relative when you were alone over hostile territory in an aircraft that was older than most of the people trying to kill you. CENTCOM Actual, Valkyrie 17. I'm showing multiple active SAM sites and increasing radio chatter. Recommend expedited extraction. This area is about to get very hot. Her assessment was clinical, professional, but the urgency was unmistakable. The enemy was waking up, bringing more assets online, coordinating a response that would turn this valley into a kill box that not even luck and skill could navigate. The response was immediate. Valkyrie 17, extraction helicopter is pushing hard but still 8 minutes out. Can you maintain cover? 8 minutes. In air combat, 8 minutes was an eternity. 8 minutes was enough time for the entire tactical situation to change, for reinforcements to arrive, for someone to get lucky with a missile shot. 8 minutes was longer than some entire dogfights lasted. CENTCOM, Valkyrie copies. Maintaining cover. She banked the aircraft into another attack run, this one targeting a newly activated radar site that was painting her aircraft with enough electronic energy to cook a turkey. The site died in a shower of sparks and secondary explosions, but 2 more appeared on her threat display like mushrooms after rain. This was becoming a game of whack-a-mole, and she was rapidly running out of ammunition. Below, the SEALs had consolidated their position and were putting up a tremendous volume of defensive fire. Tracers crisscrossed the valley floor like deadly fireworks, and the thermal signatures of attacking enemy forces were beginning to thin out. But ammunition was finite, energy was finite, and time was the most finite resource of all. Everything depended on those next 8 minutes, and whether one aging fighter pilot could hold the line against impossible odds. The 4th missile launch came without warning, rising from a position she hadn't seen on her threat display. The proximity was wrong, the angle was wrong, and for a split second that felt like an hour, Wraith thought she was going to die in this valley, in this darkness, without ever knowing if the SEALs made it home. The missile passed so close that she felt the aircraft shudder from the shock wave, so close that she could smell the cordite through her oxygen mask. But she was still flying, still fighting, and below her the infrared strobes of 12 American warriors still pulsed their desperate Morse code against the indifferent desert floor. She rolled inverted and pulled through into another attack run, the world spinning around her in a kaleidoscope of stars and tracer fire and radar warning tones that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Valkyrie 17, this is Rescue 11. I have you in sight, approaching from the southwest. Beautiful work up there, ma'am. The helicopter pilot's voice was calm, professional, tinged with the kind of respect that comes from watching someone do the impossible while making it look routine. The cavalry had arrived, and with it, the promise that this nightmare might actually have a happy ending. She climbed again, establishing a defensive orbit around the extraction site. The helicopter, a heavily modified Black Hawk bristling with defensive systems, flared into a landing hover near the SEAL position. Thermal signatures began moving toward the aircraft, 12 souls abandoning their rocky fortress for the promise of salvation spinning above them on carbon fiber blades. Taking fire, taking fire. The helicopter pilot's voice cracked with tension as tracers reached up from concealed positions, trying to swat the rescue bird from the sky. This was the moment of maximum vulnerability, when the extraction aircraft was committed to the landing, when movement was predictable, when a single lucky shot could turn salvation into catastrophe. Wraith rolled into a dive that would have violated every safety regulation ever written, her cannon spitting fire at muzzle flashes that winked like malevolent eyes in the darkness. The 20 rounds walked across enemy positions with mechanical precision, silencing guns, scattering fighters, buying the precious seconds needed for 12 warriors to run across open ground toward the helicopter that represented their only ticket home. Rescue 11, all souls aboard, we are departing. The transmission was music, pure music, the sound of a mission accomplished against impossible odds. The Black Hawk lifted off in a cloud of rotor wash and determination, climbing rapidly toward the safety of friendly airspace. Below, the enemy positions continued to fire, their tracers reaching futilely toward targets that were already beyond their grasp. CENTCOM Actual Valkyrie 17. Trident 6 is secure and en route to friendly territory. Mission accomplished. The words felt strange on her lips, anticlimactic after the intensity of the previous 30 minutes. Mission accomplished. 12 men who would see another sunrise, 12 families who wouldn't receive a folded flag, 12 warriors who would live to fight another day. The flight back to Greyfield was surreal, the adrenaline slowly fatting from her system as the F-16 8 miles with mechanical efficiency. The desert below looked peaceful in the growing light, giving no hint of the violence that had just played out among its ancient peaks and valleys. Behind her, a Black Hawk full of rescued SEALs was making its own way home, and ahead lay the cracked runways of a base that officially didn't exist. She keyed her radio one last time. CENTCOM actual Valkyrie 17 is RTB to Greyfield. Thanks for letting me play. The response was immediate, tinged with something that might have been admiration. Valkyrie 17, the thanks are all ours. Outstanding work today. Safe flight home. As the wheels of the F-16 kissed the cracked concrete of Greyfield's main runway, Wraith allowed herself a small smile. The mission was over. The SEALs were safe. And for one shining moment, the world had remembered that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways. Sometimes experience trumped technology. Sometimes skill overcame impossible odds. And sometimes a single pilot in an aging fighter could make the difference between tragedy and triumph. The canopy cracked open with a hydraulic sigh, and desert air rushed into the cockpit carrying the sense of sage and creosote and the indefinable smell of a mission accomplished. In the distance, she could hear the sound of approaching vehicles, probably base security wondering what the hell a fighter jet was doing on a runway that hadn't seen traffic in 3 years. She would have some explaining to do, some reports to write, some questions to answer. But that could wait. For now, it was enough to sit in the cockpit of her faithful F-16 and watch the sun paint the eastern mountains gold. Somewhere out there, 12 American warriors were heading home to their families, and that was worth every risk, every regulation bent, every impossible maneuver that had brought this morning to its successful conclusion. Major Patricia Wraith Castellanos had earned her call sign the hard way, by appearing where she was needed most and disappearing before anyone could ask too many questions. Today had been no different, except that today, the stakes had been higher than usual. Today, she had reminded the world that ghosts could still bite, that legends could still fly, and that sometimes the heroes everyone thought were retired still had one more mission left in them. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, but Wraith wasn't worried. She had done what needed to be done, had answered the call when it mattered most. Whatever came next, whatever questions they asked, whatever reports they demanded, she could face it all with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when it counted, when lives hung in the balance, she had delivered. The radio crackled one more time, a private frequency she hadn't heard in 3 years. "Wraith, this is Control. Welcome back." The voice belonged to someone she thought was gone forever, someone whose death had been classified, someone whose memorial service she had attended with full military honors. But voices could lie, reports could be fabricated, and sometimes the military found it useful to keep certain assets off the official books. "Control, Wraith copies. Good to hear your voice." The response felt strange, like greeting a ghost, like acknowledging a miracle. But then again, she was a ghost herself now, officially retired, officially irrelevant, officially forgotten by a military establishment that had moved on to newer, faster, more computerized ways of war. "Wraith, we need to talk. There are things happening, situations developing. This morning was just the beginning." The transmission was cryptic, loaded with implications that she wasn't sure she wanted to understand. After 3 years of enforced retirement, after 3 years of watching younger pilots take the missions she used to fly, the idea of being needed again was both terrifying and intoxicating. "Control, I'm listening." And she was, despite herself, despite the logical part of her mind that said she had done enough, sacrificed enough, risked enough for one lifetime. But the other part, the part that lived for moments like this morning, the part that defined itself through service and sacrifice, and the sacred trust between warriors. That part was already reaching for the radio, already saying yes to whatever came next. The sun climbed higher, painting the abandoned base in shades of gold and amber, and somewhere in the growing light, the future was taking shape in ways that none of them could have imagined. The mission was over, but the war, it seemed, was just beginning. And Patricia Wraith Castellanos, the ghost of Grayfield Air Station, was about to discover that some legends never truly retire. They just wait for the right moment to remind the world why they became legends in the first place.